We speak with a Catholic pro-life senator from Indiana about a recent Supreme Court announcement involving his state. The Supreme Court recently came to a divided decision on a pro-life law in Indiana. The High Court upheld one provision of the law that requires the humane and dignified disposal of the remains of aborted babies. But the court also declined to review Indiana's prenatal non-discrimination law, which prohibits abortion based on the race or gender of an unborn child. Both were signed into law by then Indiana Governor Mike Pence. The Supreme Court's decision comes as several states pass pro-life laws that could present a future challenge to Roe v. Wade, the 1973 Supreme Court decision that legalized abortion nationwide. Indiana Catholic Senator Mike Braun joins us now from Capitol Hill. Senator, thanks for being on the show.
Good to be on.
First of all, Senator, what is your reaction to the Supreme Court's recent decision regarding Indiana's pro-life law?
Well, it doesn't surprise me because that's the reason we need to keep getting judges in there that don't take the almost automatic pro-choice stance. I'm not surprised. Almost everything we've tried to do through our state legislature gets caught up in the courts. Recently, the Supreme Court did rule on something, and I'm hoping that what we're going to have is over time, more of this make it to the Supreme Court level, because almost every state, the federal courts jump in when we make moves that are going to try to knock back on abortion clinics, anything that we're doing to enhance pro-life. They come in immediately and put a stay, and that's the current dynamic. So I hope that improves.
Regarding the Indiana law, the Supreme Court did not weigh in on the provision banning discrimination abortion, which is based on the race, gender, or disability diagnosis of an unborn child.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that, Senator?
Was disappointed with that. I think that's a message from the Supreme Court that it's not going to tackle anything now that goes beyond somewhat innocuous or not significant, but I don't think that means necessarily that they won't take on the more significant cases down the road. I'm hopeful because if it doesn't happen there, we're going to still be dealing with this same context. Or they could start sending messages by taking on more stuff at the Supreme Court to send a signal to the federal court system.
Speaking of Indiana, there is another Indiana politician in the spotlight right now. South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg is running as a Democratic presidential candidate. Buttigieg has advocated for late-term abortion and, as mayor, has gone head-to-head with a pro-life pregnancy care center over a simple zoning decision. Is Pete Buttigieg's position on abortion in line with Indiana and the American electorate? What insight can you share, Senator?
I think it is not, and I think it's not only abortion, it would be his other points of view, which line up almost lockstep with the liberal side of his party. Pete might be refreshing in the sense that he's younger, taking a little different approach, but his ideology is right in line with that of Chuck Schumer and the liberal side of the Senate and the House, and I think most of the people that are running for president on the Democratic side. That's not in line with the values of most Hoosiers.
Senator, a federal judge recently released a preliminary injunction allowing an abortion center to open in South Bend without a license from the Indiana State Department of Health. Won't this put women at risk in your state?
There's no doubt about it, and I think that, again, is an aggressive, bold move by a federal court. And that's the way the tug of war is going to be playing out over the next year or so. Until we would get the presidency, have 60 senators in the U.S. Senate, and control the House, we can't do anything legislatively. The Supreme Court really needs to do the heavy lifting. And I think until they make a real statement, we're going to see a lot of these discussions on the edges, not really moving things significantly in favor of some of the more significant pro-life legislation we've seen.
Indiana Senator Mike Braun, thanks for being back on the show with us.
Thanks for having me.
And joining us now in our D.C. studio for pro-life analysis in reaction to more pro-life headlines is Marjorie Dannenfelser, president of the Susan B. Anthony List. Marjorie, always good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Catherine.
first off, we heard Senator Mike Braun share some insight into Democratic presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg's stance on abortion. How does the South Bend mayor compare to that of other candidates?
I'm a huge fan of Senator Braun. You know, he's a Knight of Columbus. He's a fantastic human being,
Catholic.
Great judge of character, also very fair. I agree with him on Buttigieg. I think that there is no question that he would like to have the veneer of a moderate state, the conservatism of Indiana, making him look like a candidate that might be able to appeal to the Rust Belt and other places that are battleground states for the presidential race. But the truth is, he's taken no particular stand at all that puts him out of league with every single one of the other candidates, with Harris, Booker, all of them. And that stance is to be for against a law that would save a baby at birth, born alive. They've all taken that stance. He is definitely for repealing the Hyde Amendment, so that you and I have to participate with our money, with our hard-earned cash, in funding that. So while he may have a little bit different veneer, he certainly is not in any way a moderate candidate when it comes to the pro-life issue.
It's a really good reminder. And we also discussed with the senator the Supreme Court's recent action on the Indiana pro-life law. Can you speak to the significance of that and what it's indicative of?
I think this Indiana law, the abortion discrimination piece, could potentially be the explosive issue that eventually gets to the Supreme Court. The first part of that law was a real just hands-down victory, that it allows states to sadly dispose of the human remains of unborn children in a way that they deem dignified, rather than just being treated as human waste and thrown into a dumpster. The other piece of that law, which was discouraging in one way because we wanted the court to actually take that case up, look at it, was in two ways still good. It was not struck down under Casey, the Planned Parenthood versus Casey law. They basically just said, let's let it sit. And if anyone wants to Google Justice Thomas's opinion on this in terms of, he was explaining why he wasn't going to take it up, but he wanted it to be very clear, his opinion about the ethnicity form of discrimination when it comes to abortion. He went through the whole Margaret Sanger Planned Parenthood history about how we can't stand in this nation for such values. And he said it's inevitable that we will have to come to terms on what this is when it comes to abortion.
And speaking of the courts, there was a major pro-life victory last week when a panel of the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals lifted injunctions against the Trump administration's Protect Life rule. What does this rule exactly allow now?
Yeah. So the Protect Life rule keeps abortion out of the family planning program in the United States. It's called the Title X program, for lack of that's the nomenclature. What happened there in the 9th Circuit, of all places, the most liberal circuit in the country, is really in the process of changing. Thank you to our California people who prayed through this whole thing. There was a three-bank of judges that said that that they gave the opinion that this rule should be allowed to go into place, that abortion funding, as stated in the statute, should stay separate from family planning always. Now, unfortunately, there's further challenges. There's going to be an 11 judge bank of judges that will also rule on it, and we'll see what happens there. Unfortunately, it's not over. And so it isn't in law yet. But we believe, look, it could be a month, it could be a year. It's another reason that, frankly, the coming elections make an enormous difference.
We are seeing abortion advocates challenge the Protect Life rule in the courts, but is it in jeopardy at all by Congress?
Well, and in Congress right now, you know where we are. We're in a constant game of defense in terms of what comes out of the House. Every horrible thing that's coming out of the House of Representatives, and there's a lot of horrible stuff, is backstopped by the Senate, which is fantastic. Now we have a pro-life majority there, and the President of the United States, who has put out a veto threat for anything that overturns any current pro-life policy. So while it is very difficult, we can't make any headway in the House, we at least know that we have champions in the Senate and we have a champion in the White House who will not let any of these things get overturned.
Continued. And finally, Marjorie, turning now to another devastating story. A court in the United Kingdom authorized doctors to commit an abortion on a developmentally disabled woman, a Catholic, against her own wishes, thankfully, this week, a higher court overturned the ruling. As an American pro-life leader, what's been your reaction to this international story?
Well, Catherine, you know, we talk about the news when it comes to life all the time. This is one that just cuts across everything. Our faith, the news, our emotions, our position as parents, as sisters of people that we know have special needs. I have a daughter that exact same age with exactly the same diagnosis. And what we're hearing from the mother and the child, who has an intellect of 6, but the body and the soul created by God that is at a different place, that they wanted to keep the child. So only a mentality that sees children and people as objects and disposable, that only an elite view that we know better about what's best, and that you can't possibly, grandmother of this baby, take care of it because we know better, and it should never be allowed to come into the world. Thank God that sentiment was slapped down by the court. But for a few days here, we did not think that. And they've got a problem in England. This is the same. This is the same England that was with Alfie Evans' case and with Charlie Gard. I mean, and this is just another in the string. And I think it's waking them up. I know it has awakened the world.
Truly praise God that was overturned.
Praise God, yes. Right.
And thank you for being with us and sharing your analysis and insight with us, Marjorie Dannenfelser, president of the Susan B. Anthony List.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you.